The Afghan sun hammered down on the convoy of armored vehicles, crawling through the mountain pass like a physical weight. Inside the 3rd MRAP, Staff Sergeant Ilara Mackenzie pressed her back against the metal wall, feeling the heat radiate through her body armor. At 23, she'd learned to ignore discomfort. In this line of work, comfort was a luxury nobody could afford. Her fingers traced the edge of the brass compass in her pocket, a habit, a ritual. Her father's compass, engraved with coordinates that had meant everything to him, and now meant everything to her. Coordinates that marked a place 6 kilometers from where this convoy would stop, a place where Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Mackenzie had taken his last breath 17 years ago. Nobody on the team knew. Not Chief Warrant Officer Harlan Reeves. Not the other SEALs who treated her with careful, professional courtesy. And especially not Callum Thorne, the primary sniper whose ammunition she carried, whose rifle she maintained, whose every movement she studied like a graduate student dissecting ancient texts. The MRAP hit a pothole, jolting everyone inside. Across from Ilara, Petty Officer Wade Garrison checked his medical kit for the 3rd time. Next to him, Senior Chief Dalton Cross cleaned his breaching shotgun with methodical precision. These men were legends. SEAL Team 7 had operated in this valley for 8 months, conducting operations that had crippled Taliban networks throughout Helmand Province. And she was their ammunition specialist, the person who carried extra magazines, the one who made sure the shooters never ran dry. Ilara had joined the Army straight out of West Virginia coal country, where opportunities came as rarely as compliments, and military service was woven into family history like veins of coal in mountain rock. Her great-grandfather had stormed Normandy. Her grandfather had served 2 tours in Korea. Her father had been a Marine scout sniper until Afghanistan took him in 2007, leaving behind a 9-year-old daughter and a compass that pointed toward vengeance. But vengeance required capability, and capability required skills she wasn't supposed to have. For 18 months, Ilara had watched. She'd observed Callum Thorne's every shot, memorizing his breathing patterns, the way he calculated wind drift, how he adjusted for temperature and elevation. During downtime at the forward operating base, she'd practiced in secret, dry firing in her quarters, mental calculations of ballistic trajectories, physical conditioning that went beyond standard requirements because snipers needed absolute body control. Callum had noticed. Of course he had. A man who could spot a target at 900 yards wasn't going to miss details in his own team. 3 months ago, he'd approached her after she'd been studying a range card he'd left on a table. "You've got the eye, Mackenzie," he'd said, his Idaho drawl as flat as the plains he'd grown up on. "Most people look, you see." That had been the beginning. Informal instruction sessions that started with ballistic theory and evolved into actual trigger time. Callum letting her shoot his M110 during training exercises, correcting her form, teaching her the mathematics of death delivered at distance. The other SEALs had noticed, but said nothing. In special operations, unconventional was standard operating procedure. The convoy slowed, then stopped. Chief Reeves' voice crackled through the comm system. "Dismount in 2. Gear check. We've got a 3-hour patrol to the objective." Ilara checked her equipment with practiced efficiency. Her M4 carbine, cleaned and zeroed, 4 magazines for her own weapon, 8 magazines for Callum's M110 semi-automatic sniper system, medical kit, water, protein bars that tasted like cardboard but provided calories when your body was eating itself from exertion, and most importantly, the spotting scope that had become an extension of her awareness. The ramp dropped, flooding the MRAP with blinding sunlight and heat that felt like opening an oven door. Ilara stepped out into Afghanistan, land of mountains, in memory, and men who killed for belief systems older than America itself. The team formed up without words, each SEAL moving to his assigned position. Callum took point as primary scout, his movements fluid despite carrying 60 pounds of gear. Chief Reeves directed traffic with hand signals, his weathered face showing no emotion beneath wraparound sunglasses. Ilara fell in behind Callum, matching his pace, watching his six like her life depended on it. Because his life depended on it, which meant hers did too. They began to climb. The Afghan terrain was beautiful in a hostile, indifferent way. Sharp rocks the color of rust and bone. Sparse vegetation that somehow survived on nothing. Mountains that seemed to touch a sky so blue it hurt to look at directly. This land had broken empires. The British had tried to tame it. The Soviets had bled into it. Now Americans moved through it, trying to accomplish in years what others had failed to do in centuries. 40 minutes into the patrol, Ilara's uniform was soaked through with sweat. The weight of her pack cut into her shoulders, but she'd long ago learned to compartmentalize pain. Pain was just information. It told you that you were still alive, still functioning, still mission capable. Callum raised a fist. The team halted. He'd spotted something. A disturbance in the pattern, some detail that didn't belong. Ilara moved up beside him, staying low, and followed his eye line to a cluster of rocks 300 meters ahead. Wire, Callum murmured, barely audible. Possible IED. Chief Reeves called up Dalton Cross, whose specialty was explosives. The big Montana native moved forward with the careful deliberation of a man who knew that one wrong step could scatter him across the landscape. 10 minutes later, Dalton gave the all-clear signal. Not an IED, just debris from an old Soviet mine that had already detonated decades ago. The team moved on. This was combat in Afghanistan. Hours of careful movement punctuated by moments of adrenaline when every rock could hide death and every shadow could conceal an enemy fighter. They reached the base of the ridge as the sun reached its apex, turning the world into a furnace. Chief Reeves checked his GPS, confirmed their position, and pointed up the slope. Overwatch establishes here. Callum, Mackenzie, you've got the high ground. Rest of us set security perimeter. Ilara and Callum began the final climb. The ridge rose 300 meters above the valley floor, a knife edge of rock that provided commanding views of the village designated Khalid-e-Zaman. Intelligence reported that Commander Khalid Hassan was using a compound in that village as a command center. Khalid, known to American forces as the Viper, was a legend in the worst possible way. Soviet trained in the 1980s, he'd fought the Mujahideen Civil War in the 1990s, survived the American invasion in 2001, and spent 23 years perfecting the art of killing American soldiers from distance. Intelligence credited him with 23 confirmed kills, 23 American snipers who'd gone into the mountains and never come home. 24, if you counted Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Mackenzie. But the official records didn't count him because the Marine Corps had never confirmed who'd made the shot that killed him. The after-action report listed enemy sniper fire as cause of death. Nothing more specific. Ilara knew better. She'd spent years accessing classified databases, piecing together fragments of intelligence reports, cross-referencing Taliban radio intercepts. She knew exactly who'd killed her father. And she knew that man was in the village below, 920 yards from where she was about to establish a sniper position. "You good?" Callum's voice pulled her back to the present. "Solid," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. They reached the military crest of the ridge, that perfect position just below the actual peak that provided maximum observation while minimizing their silhouette against the sky. Callum immediately began setting up his hide, arranging rocks to create natural concealment while providing a stable shooting platform. Ilara pulled out the spotting scope and began scanning the village. Through the high-powered optics, Khalid-e-Zaman resolved into sharp detail. Mud brick buildings clustered around a central marketplace, narrow streets that looked ancient because they were. Goats wandering with the aimless purpose of livestock. Children playing in the shade of doorways. A village that could have existed unchanged for 1,000 years. But Ilara wasn't looking for history, she was looking for targets. "Compound, eastern edge," she murmured. Two-story structure, reinforced walls, guards at the corners. Callum swung his M110 to acquire the target area. The rifle was a work of art and engineering, chambered in 7.62 by 51 millimeters NATO, capable of accurate fire out to 800 meters and effective fire beyond that in skilled hands. In Callum's hands, the rifle could reach out to 900 yards and touch targets with surgical precision. He settled behind the weapon, adjusting the loopholed Mark IV scope, checking his natural point of aim. Range? Alara consulted her laser rangefinder. 920 yards to the compound entrance, 945 to the rooftop positions. Callum made mental notes, his face expressionless. This was his element, this intersection of mathematics and violence, where physics became philosophy, and every shot was a moral calculation wrapped in a technical problem. Wind? He asked. Alara studied the vegetation in the valley, watched the heat shimmer rising from sun-baked rock, noted the direction of dust devils dancing across open ground. 7 miles per hour, quartering left to right, gusting to maybe 9. Callum made a minute adjustment to his scope. Temperature? 94 Fahrenheit. Humidity? Low, maybe 15%. These numbers mattered. Temperature affected powder burn rate, which affected muzzle velocity, which affected bullet trajectory. Humidity affected air density. Wind was never constant, always shifting, requiring continuous adjustment. And at extreme range, even the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation became a factor. Sniping wasn't shooting. It was applied mathematics delivered through gunpowder and lead. The rest of the team had established a security perimeter around their position. Wade Garrison was positioned 50 meters to their right, watching their flank. Dalton Cross held the left side. Petty Officer Finn Barrett, the team's communications specialist, had set up the satellite radio and was maintaining contact with command. Chief Reeves crawled up beside Callum and Alara. Intel confirms Khalid is in the village. No timeline on when he'll show himself. Could be hours. Could be days. We wait. And so they waited. Hours passed with the slow torture of motionless observation. The sun tracked across the sky, shadows lengthening and shifting, the heat gradually diminishing but never truly disappearing. Alara and Callum took turns on the optics, one watching while the other rested eyes that could be damaged by hours of intense focus through magnified glass. They didn't speak much, didn't need to. After months of working together, they developed the kind of wordless communication that came from shared purpose and mutual trust. Around 1400 hours, Callum broke the silence. "Why'd you really join up, Mackenzie?" The question caught her off guard. In all their time together, he'd never asked anything personal. "Family tradition," she replied, keeping it simple. "Bullshit." Callum's voice was soft, without judgment. "Nobody carries themselves the way you do just because of tradition. You move like someone with something to prove." Alara kept her eyes on the spotting scope. In the village below, an old man was leading a donkey through the marketplace. "Maybe I do." "Who you proving it to?" "Myself." Callum was quiet for a long moment. Then, 4 years ago I had a spotter, PFC Brendan Locke. Good kid from Maine. Smart, eager, wanted to be a sniper himself someday. Alara listened, sensing this was important. "We were on overwatch during a village clearing operation. I spotted a high-value target, positive ID, perfect shot. But we didn't have clearance to engage. Command wanted him alive for interrogation." Callum's voice went flat, empty. "I took the shot anyway, dropped the target, but the gunfire gave away our position. Enemy fighters zeroed in on us. Brendan took 3 rounds while we were displacing. Died before the medevac could get there." "That wasn't your fault," Alara said quietly. "Wasn't it? I made a choice. Brendan paid the price." Callum adjusted his grip on the rifle. "That's why I teach you, why I let you shoot, why I share what I know. Because if something happens to me, the mission still needs to get done. And because you're the best natural talent I've seen in 13 years of doing this work. You deserve to know that. Before Ilara could respond, movement in the village caught her attention. Activity, she reported, eye pressed to the spotting scope. Eastern compound, multiple individuals emerging. Callum acquired the target area through his rifle scope. Count, 6, no, 8 personnel, armed, AK-pattern rifles, moving with tactical discipline. This wasn't normal village activity. These men moved like soldiers, like professionals. They established security positions around the compound entrance, while others began unloading crates from a pickup truck. Then a ninth figure emerged from the building. Even at 920 yards, even through the heat shimmer distorting the air, Ilara recognized the distinctive gait. A slight limp in the left leg, legacy of a Soviet grenade that had torn through his thigh in the Panjshir Valley in 1987. Target, she breathed. Center of the compound entrance. Positive identification. That's Khalid. Callum's breathing slowed, his body going absolutely still in the way that preceded a shot. Through his rifle scope, he watched the man who'd killed 23 American snipers. The man who'd turned asymmetric warfare into an art form. The man intelligence agencies had been hunting for 2 decades. Confirm ID, Chief Reeves' voice crackled through their earpieces. Ilara zoomed the spotting scope to maximum magnification. Gray beard, weathered face, distinctive scar tissue around the left eye from an old wound. Confirmed. Commander Khalid Hassan, call sign Viper, 95% certainty. Stand by for engagement clearance, Chief Reeves said, coordinating with command. Callum's finger moved to the trigger guard, waiting. The shot was perfect. Khalid was standing in the open, talking with his men, completely exposed. 920 yards, 7-mile-per-hour wind, slight uphill angle, every variable calculated. Ilara felt her heart hammering. This was it, the moment 17 years of preparation had built toward. The man who'd killed her father was in the crosshairs, and all they needed was 3 words from command. Cleared to engage. But something felt wrong. Ilara swept her spotting scope across the village, looking for the source of her unease. Rooftop, empty. Alley entrance, clear. Market area, civilians going about their business. Then she saw it. A glint of light from a window, not sunlight reflecting off glass. Glass didn't exist in most Afghan villages. This was light reflecting off something smooth and curved, something like a scope lens. Callum, she said quietly, rooftop, northeast corner, 11 o'clock from target. He shifted slightly, scanning. Got it. Possible fighting position. Ilara kept searching. Another glint, different rooftop, then another, and another. Her blood went cold. Multiple positions, she reported, voice tight. 6, no, 8. Rooftop emplacements with crew-served weapons. This isn't a hideout. Callum saw it too. PKM machine guns, RPG teams, all positioned to create overlapping fields of fire, all aimed at the ridge where SEAL Team 7 had established their overwatch. Chief, Callum transmitted, his voice urgent but controlled. This is a trap. Target is bait. We've got multiple heavy weapons positions oriented on our location. Recommend immediate extraction. Chief Reeves didn't hesitate. All elements break contact. Fighting withdrawal to Rally Point Bravo. Move now. But it was already too late. The first RPG launched from a position they hadn't spotted, a dry creek bed 400 meters from their location. The rocket motor screamed across the valley, trailing white smoke. Incoming, Wade Garrison shouted. The round impacted 30 meters below their position, the explosion sending rock fragments and dust cascading over them. Before the debris settled, 3 more RPGs launched simultaneously. The ambush had been perfectly planned. Khalid hadn't been bait, he'd been the trigger. The moment SEAL Team 7 revealed their position by preparing to engage, the trap had sprung. Callum immediately shifted from hunting to survival. His rifle barked 3 times in rapid succession, 3 different positions, 3 threats neutralized. RPG teams, prioritize! Ilara fed him a fresh magazine, her hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the chaos. Around them, the rest of the team was returning fire, trying to suppress the enemy long enough to execute a fighting withdrawal. But there were too many. 50, maybe 60 Taliban fighters, all in prepared positions, all with pre-sighted firing lanes. This wasn't a hasty ambush. This was a deliberate operation, planned and rehearsed specifically to kill American Special Operations Forces. Chief Reeves was on the radio, calling for close air support, for quick reaction forces, for anything that could shift the balance. But the nearest Apache gunships were 15 minutes out. The team didn't have 15 minutes. Moving, Dalton Cross shouted, sprinting from his position toward a cluster of rocks that offered better cover. He'd made it 10 meters when the PKM fire found him. Rounds stitched across his body armor, spinning him around. He went down hard. Wade Garrison immediately began crawling toward the fallen SEAL, medical kit already in his hands. But the enemy fire was too intense. He had to take cover behind an outcropping, pinned down, unable to reach the wounded man. Callum continued engaging targets with mechanical precision. 1 shot, 1 kill. Another shot, another fighter down. But for every enemy he eliminated, 2 more appeared. The mathematics of combat were brutal and simple. 8 Americans against 60-plus Taliban in prepared positions meant the Americans were going to lose unless something changed. The something that changed was the rocket-propelled grenade that detonated 3 feet from where Callum Thorne was firing. Ilara never saw it coming. One moment she was scanning for targets, the next the world transformed into fire and noise and flying metal. The blast wave picked her up and threw her backward like she weighed nothing. She felt herself airborne, saw the sky rotating, then hit the ground with an impact that drove every molecule of air from her lungs. For several seconds, she existed in a gray void where sound and sight had no meaning. Her ears rang with a high-pitched scream that drowned out everything else. Dust filled her mouth, her nose, her eyes. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except lie there and wait for her body to remember how to function. Training saved her. Muscle memory that operated independent of conscious thought. She performed a tactical self-assessment, moving each limb, checking for arterial bleeding, determining if she was combat effective or about to die. Left shoulder, massive pain, possibly dislocated. Forehead, bleeding from a laceration. Ribs, painful but functional. Legs, responsive. Arms, working. She could fight, she could move. Then memory returned and she remembered Callum. Ilara forced herself to her hands and knees, fighting the wave of nausea that threatened to empty her stomach. The world spun, but she fixed her gaze on a single point and waited for equilibrium to return. She saw Callum 20 feet away. He was on his back, his body twisted wrong, blood staining his uniform in multiple places. Steam rose from his torn body armor, where white-hot shrapnel had punched through. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at the sky without seeing it. Ilara crawled to him, every movement an exercise in controlled agony. Her left shoulder screamed in protest, but she ignored it. Pain was just information. She reached Callum and pressed 2 fingers against his carotid artery. For a horrible moment, she felt nothing. Then, a pulse. Weak, rapid, barely there, but present. Callum Thorne was alive. His eyes flickered, found her face. His lips moved, blood bubbling at the corners of his mouth. She leaned close, trying to hear him over the continuing gunfire. "The shot," he whispered. "Make the shot." Then his eyes rolled back and consciousness left him. Ilara performed a rapid trauma assessment. Sucking chest wound on the right side, air entering the thoracic cavity with each attempted breath. Multiple shrapnel wounds across his abdomen and legs. Significant blood loss. Without immediate medical intervention, Callum had maybe 10 minutes before he went into irreversible shock. The radio crackled in her ear. Chief Reeves, his voice tight with controlled urgency. All elements report status. Callum, Mackenzie, sit rep. Ilara keyed her radio with a blood-slicked hand. Mackenzie, Callum is down. Critical injuries, multiple penetrating trauma. I need medevac now. Working it. Air assets inbound 8 minutes. Can you stabilize him? Negative. Wade's pinned down. Can't reach us. I don't have medical gear. Enemy fire continued to crack overhead, rounds impacting the rocks around their position. Ilara could see Taliban fighters advancing up the slope in fire teams, moving with tactical discipline. They were closing the distance, maybe 300 yards now, and they knew the Americans were hurt. The radio crackled again. Wade is pinned down. Dalton took hits. Wade's providing trauma care. Can't reach your position. You need to stabilize Callum and move to Rally Point Charlie. Move Callum. A man with chest trauma and possible spinal injuries and blood loss that was turning his uniform black. Move him across broken terrain while under fire from an enemy that had them zeroed. The mathematics of the situation were brutal. Wade couldn't reach them. The rest of the team was scattered and suppressed. Air support was still minutes out, and the Taliban fighters were advancing, closing the distance with every passing second. Ilara looked at Callum, dying in front of her. Looked at the enemy fighters, 300 yards away and getting closer. Looked at the M110 rifle lying 3 feet away, somehow intact despite the explosion that had nearly killed them both. The decision crystallized with perfect clarity. She couldn't save Callum, not with her limited medical training and zero equipment. But she could buy time, could keep the enemy from overrunning their position long enough for help to arrive. Could do the one thing she'd spent 18 months training for. She could make the shots. Ilara reached for the rifle. The weight of it settled into her hands like destiny. 18 months of observation, hundreds of hours of secret practice, countless sessions where Callum had taught her everything he knew about the art of precision shooting. All of it had been building to this moment. She pulled the rifle to her shoulder, feeling the stock settle against her cheek in a position that felt more natural than breathing. Through the scope, the world resolved into sharp clarity. She could see individual fighters, see their faces, see the confidence in their movements as they advanced on what they thought was a defeated enemy. The first target was a squad leader at 640 yards, directing his men with hand signals. Ilara's crosshairs settled on his chest. She remembered Callum's teaching. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6, let the shot break between heartbeats. She exhaled. The rifle barked. Through the scope, she watched the squad leader drop like someone had cut his strings. The men around him froze, confused, looking for the source of the shot. Ilara chambered another round and shifted to the next target. A PKM gunner at 720 yards, setting up his weapon on a bipod. Headshot. The fighter collapsed behind his machine gun. A third target. Radio operator at 580 yards, calling in coordinates. Center mass. He went down, the radio flying from his hands. The advancing Taliban fighters scattered, diving for cover. Their confident advance turned into scrambling chaos. They'd expected wounded, disorganized Americans. They'd gotten precision fire from someone who'd learned from the best and was now demonstrating exactly how much she'd learned. Ilara worked the rifle with mechanical efficiency, target to target, shot to shot. Each round a mathematical problem solved in real time. Wind speed times distance divided by bullet velocity, adjusted for temperature and elevation, and the dozen other variables that separated a hit from a miss. She wasn't thinking. Thinking was too slow. She was operating on pure, trained instinct, her body and the rifle moving as one integrated weapon system. Chief Reeves' voice in her ear. Mackenzie, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You just bought us breathing room. Breathing room. Such a simple phrase for the difference between life and death. Ilara shifted her aim to a cluster of fighters gathering behind a low wall, clearly preparing for another push. She put 3 rounds into the group in rapid succession. The would-be assault scattered before it could form. In the distance, she could hear the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors, the Apache gunships, inbound, bringing salvation in the form of 30mm chain guns and Hellfire missiles. But the Taliban weren't done yet. Through her scope, Ilara saw movement on a rooftop in the village, a figure climbing into position, carrying a long rifle. Not an AK-47, something purpose-built for distance shooting. The figure settled behind the weapon, and Ilara felt a chill run through her. She recognized the distinctive profile of an SVD Dragunov sniper rifle, and she recognized the man holding it, even at 780 yards. The same limp, the same gray beard, the same scar tissue around the left eye. Commander Khalid Hassan had entered the fight. For a moment, sniper and sniper looked at each other across 3/4 of a mile of Afghan landscape. Two professionals who understood that in the next few seconds, one of them was going to die. Khalid fired first. The 7.62 by 54 R round from the Dragunov cracked past Ilara's head, missing by 8 inches. Close enough that she felt the pressure wave. Close enough to know that he'd read her position perfectly. She returned fire immediately, her shot punching a fist-sized hole in the wall beside Khalid's position. He rolled away, disappearing behind cover, and Ilara lost visual contact. She swept her scope across possible positions, looking for him, knowing he was doing the same thing. This was the duel Khalid had been preparing for. Not against Callum Thorne, experienced SEAL sniper, against Ilara Mackenzie, the ammunition carrier who'd become something more in a moment of desperate necessity, against the daughter of the man he'd killed 17 years ago. Because Ilara suddenly understood with perfect clarity that Khalid knew exactly who she was. The ambush hadn't been about killing a SEAL team, it had been about killing her, finishing what he'd started when he'd put a bullet through Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Mackenzie's heart. The compass in her pocket suddenly felt heavier than the rifle in her hands. "Come on," she whispered to the scope, to the desert, to the ghost of her father. "Show yourself." And Khalid did. He appeared on a different rooftop, elevated position, 890 yards away. The angle was severe, the range was extreme, and he had the advantage of height. He was settling into shooting position, the Dragunov's muzzle swinging toward where Wade Garrison was trying to provide medical aid to Dalton Cross. Khalid was going to shoot the medic, going to kill the man trying to save a wounded SEAL, going to prove that mercy was weakness, and weakness deserved death. Ilara had maybe 2 seconds before he fired. The mathematics scrolled through her mind with crystalline clarity. Range, 890 yards. Wind, 11 miles per hour, gusting to 14. Angle, 38 degrees uphill. Temperature, 94 Fahrenheit. Humidity, 15%. All these variables feeding into ballistic calculations that determined exactly where the bullet would be 2 seconds after it left the barrel. Callum had taught her this, had drilled it into her until the numbers became instinct. Extreme angles change your holdover. Trust the math, Mackenzie. Trust the math. She trusted the math. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed to just the crosshairs in the target. She could see Khalid's finger moving to his trigger, could see Wade Garrison 50 yards below, completely exposed and unaware of the threat. Ilara exhaled, let her heart beat twice, and squeezed the trigger between the beats. The 175-grain Sierra Match King left the barrel at 2,700 feet per second. It traveled for just over 2 seconds, covering the distance while fighting wind and gravity in air resistance. 890 yards of flight time, where 1,000 variables could turn a perfect shot into a clean miss. The bullet struck Commander Khalid Hassan's rifle receiver with perfect precision, the impact destroying the Dragunov's action and turning it into an inert piece of metal and wood. Secondary fragments caught Khalid in the shoulder and hand, spinning him away from the rooftop edge. He'd live, but his rifle was destroyed, his shoulder was wounded, and his mystique of invincibility had just been shattered by an American woman who wasn't supposed to be capable of making that shot. The Taliban assault collapsed. Without their commander, without their prepared positions giving them advantage, the fighters began withdrawing. They'd expected an easy victory. Instead, they'd found something they hadn't planned for. They'd found Ilara Mackenzie with a rifle in her hands and 17 years of rage refined into surgical precision. The Apache gunships arrived 30 seconds later, their chain guns finishing what Ilara had started. The village erupted with explosions as the helicopters engaged every hostile position they could identify. Chief Reeves appeared beside Ilara, his face streaked with dust and sweat. Medevac bird inbound 60 seconds. We need to move Callum to the landing zone. Wade Garrison had finally reached them, medical kit deployed. He was working on Callum with desperate efficiency, applying pressure bandages, starting an IV, doing everything possible to keep the wounded sniper alive long enough to reach surgical facilities. Ilara set the rifle down gently, reverently. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline that had kept her steady during the fight, draining away and leaving her feeling hollow and weak. She looked down at Callum. His face was gray, his breathing shallow and rapid. But he was breathing. He was alive. And that was enough. The Black Hawk medevac helicopter thundered overhead, its rotor wash kicking up a blinding storm of dust. Ilara helped Wade load Callum onto a stretcher, then helped carry him to the landing zone. Every step was agony. Her shoulder felt like someone was driving nails through the joint, but she didn't let go. Wouldn't let go, not until Callum was safe. As the helicopter lifted off, Ilara looked back at the village one final time. Through the smoke and dust, she could see a figure standing on a distant rooftop, 700 yards away, too far for her to make out details without optics. But she knew who it was. Commander Khalid Hassan, watching, wounded but alive, defeated but not destroyed. Their eyes met across the distance, two snipers who now understood they were linked by blood and violence in a war that wouldn't end until one of them was dead. Ilara touched the compass in her pocket. Soon, Dad, she thought. Soon. The helicopter banked hard, and the village disappeared from view. Part one of her mission was complete. Callum was alive. The team had survived. But the war was just beginning. The world returned in fragments. Sound first, a high-pitched ringing that drowned everything else. Then sensation, pain radiating from her left shoulder in waves that made her stomach clench. Then sight, blurry and doubled, the Afghan sky swimming above her like she was looking through water. Ilara Mackenzie forced herself to focus, forced her training to override the chaos her nervous system was broadcasting. She ran through the tactical self-assessment checklist that had been drilled into her until it became automatic. Breathing, functional, though her ribs screamed with each inhalation. Vision, clearing, the double images resolving into single objects. Hearing, coming back, the ringing fading enough to let other sounds through. Extremities, left arm barely responsive, right arm working, both legs functional. Combat effective, barely, but functional enough. The memories crashed back, the RPG impact, the blast wave, the sensation of flying through air that had turned solid as concrete. And Callum. Ilara rolled onto her right side, using her good arm to push herself up. Every movement sent fresh lightning through her shoulder, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself vertical. Pain was just information. Right now, that information was telling her she had a dislocated shoulder and possibly cracked ribs. Not life-threatening. She could function. She found Callum 15 feet away, and her heart stopped. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, wasn't anything except a broken shape on the ground. His uniform dark with blood, his body positioned at angles that bodies shouldn't bend. Ilara crawled to him, her left arm useless, dragging herself across rock and dirt that tore through her uniform. She reached him and pressed 2 fingers against his carotid artery, searching for the pulse that would mean life, or the absence that would mean she'd failed. For 3 eternal seconds, she felt nothing. Then, faint as whisper, she felt it. A pulse. Weak, irregular. The kind of pulse that said a man was hovering on the edge of the cliff and could fall either direction, depending on the next few minutes. Callum's eyes were closed, his face slack. Blood bubbled from his mouth with each shallow breath. Ilara recognized the signs immediately from her combat lifesaver training. Sucking chest wound, air entering the thoracic cavity, collapsing the lung, creating pressure that would eventually stop the heart. He needed a chest seal, needed a needle decompression, needed a fully equipped trauma team and a surgical suite, needed things that were minutes or hours away when he had seconds. Enemy fire continued to crack overhead. The ambush that had started when Khalid revealed himself was still in full effect. Ilara could hear the distinctive rattle of PKM machine guns, the deeper boom of RPG launches, the overlapping chaos of a firefight where her team was outnumbered and outgunned. Through the smoke and dust, she could see Taliban fighters moving. Not the scattered rabble that poorly trained militias became under fire. These men moved with tactical discipline, fire teams advancing while others provided suppressive fire. Khalid had trained them well. The radio crackled in her ear, Chief Reeves' voice tight with controlled urgency. All elements, status report, Callum, Mackenzie, respond. Ilara keyed her mic with a shaking hand. Mackenzie, Callum is critical. Multiple penetrating wounds, sucking chest wound, unconscious. I need Wade here now. There was a pause, filled with the sound of gunfire. Then, Wade is pinned down. Dalton took hits. Wade's providing trauma care. Can't reach your position. You need to stabilize Callum and move to Rally Point Charlie. Move Callum. A man with chest trauma and possible spinal injuries and blood loss that was turning his uniform black. Move him across broken terrain while under fire from an enemy that had them zeroed. The mathematics of the situation were brutal. Wade couldn't reach them. The rest of the team was scattered and suppressed. Air support was still minutes out, and the Taliban fighters were advancing, closing the distance with every passing second. The decision was made in the space between heartbeats. She crawled to the rifle, every movement an exercise in controlled agony. Her left shoulder was completely non-functional now, the joint grinding in ways that made her vision gray at the edges. But her right arm worked. Her right hand could grip. She could shoot. The M110 felt heavier than she remembered, or maybe she was just weaker. She pulled it to her shoulder, settling the stock against her cheek, her eye finding the scope with muscle memory that operated independent of conscious thought. Through the magnified optics, the battlefield resolved into sharp detail. She could see individual Taliban fighters advancing in a skirmish line, could see their faces, young and old, all carrying the hard certainty of men who believed God was on their side. The first target was a squad leader at 640 yards, moving from cover to cover while directing his men with hand signals. Ilara's crosshairs settled on his chest. She remembered Callum's teaching, remembered the hundreds of hours watching him shoot, the practice sessions where he'd corrected her form, the mathematical precision of ballistics calculated in real time. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6, let the shot break between heartbeats. She exhaled slowly, feeling her heart beat twice, and squeezed the trigger between the beats. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the recoil sending fresh agony through her injured side. Through the scope, she watched the squad leader drop. The men around him froze, looking for the threat, confusion replacing confidence. Ilara worked the charging handle, chambering another round. The mechanical action was smooth, practiced, the kind of movement that happened faster than thought. She shifted to her next target, PKM gunner at 720 yards, setting up his machine gun on a bipod. The weapon was a crew-served beast that could tear apart their position in seconds. Couldn't let him get set. Elara adjusted her aim, compensating for wind and distance. The gunner was focused on his weapon, unaware he was in someone's crosshairs. She centered the reticle on his head and fired. The 175-grain bullet crossed 720 yards in just over a second. The gunner collapsed behind his weapon, his body going instantly slack. Third target, radio operator at 580 yards, hunched over his handset, probably calling in coordinates for indirect fire. Center mass shot. He went down, the radio flying from his hands. The Taliban advance faltered. 3 men down in 10 seconds, all precision shots from an enemy they couldn't see. The fighters scattered, diving for cover, their organized advance turning into defensive chaos. Elara kept shooting, target to target, shot to shot. Each round a mathematical problem solved in the space between heartbeats. Wind speed times distance divided by bullet velocity, adjusted for temperature and air density and elevation, and the dozen other variables that separated hitting from missing. She wasn't thinking. Thinking was too slow. She was operating on pure, trained instinct, her body and the rifle moving as a single, integrated system. Every hour of secret practice, every lesson from Callum, every calculation and adjustment and correction was distilled into this moment. This was what her father had done, what Callum did, what real snipers did when everything else stripped away and only the mission remained. Chief Reeves's voice crackled in her ear. "Mackenzie, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You just bought us breathing room." Breathing room meant time. Time meant the Apaches could arrive. Time meant Wade could stabilize Dalton and move to their position. Time meant Callum might survive long enough to reach a surgeon. Time was measured in bullets, and Elara was spending them with surgical precision. She shifted her aim to a cluster of fighters gathering behind a low wall, clearly preparing for another coordinated push. 3 shots in rapid succession. The assault element scattered before they could organize, men diving for cover as rounds impacted around them. Her ammunition was running low. She'd started with 80 rounds in 4 magazines. She was on her 3rd magazine now, maybe 15 rounds left. Had to make them count. Through the scope, she saw movement in the village below. A figure climbing onto a rooftop, carrying something long and purpose-built. Not an AK-47, not a PKM, something else. The figure settled into position, and Elara's blood went cold. Even at 780 yards, even through the heat shimmer and dust, she recognized the distinctive profile of an SVD Dragunov sniper rifle. The weapon had been the Soviet answer to American precision shooting, a semi-automatic platform that could reach out to 800 meters in trained hands. And the man holding it was the most trained hands Afghanistan had produced. Commander Khalid Hassan had entered the fight. Elara watched through her scope as Khalid settled behind his rifle. He moved with the economy of motion that came from decades of experience, every movement purposeful and precise. He was scanning, searching, looking for the American sniper who'd just torn apart his carefully planned ambush. For a moment, their eyes met across 780 yards of hostile terrain. 2 professionals who understood that in the next few seconds, one of them was going to die. Khalid fired first. Elara saw the muzzle flash and dove sideways on pure instinct. The 7.62 by 54 R round from the Dragunov cracked past where her head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Close enough that she felt the pressure wave. Close enough to know that Khalid had read her position perfectly. She rolled behind a cluster of rocks, her shoulders screaming, and brought the M110 up. Through the scope, she searched for Khalid's position. He'd moved, displaced after his shot, doing exactly what she would have done. This was different from shooting Taliban fighters. They were soldiers, dangerous and determined, but not specialists. Khalid was a sniper. 40 years of combat experience, trained by Soviets who'd learned their craft in the crucible of the Eastern Front. 23 confirmed kills against American snipers who thought they were the best in the world. 24 if you counted her father. Ilara swept her scope across possible positions, looking for any sign of movement, any glint of light off glass, any disturbance in the pattern. Khalid was doing the same thing, both of them hunting each other across a landscape that offered 1,000 hiding places. There, a shadow that was slightly wrong, a darkness in a window that moved against the wind. Ilara centered her crosshairs and waited, patient as stone, for confirmation. Khalid appeared for just a moment, checking a sightline, and Ilara fired. Her round punched through the wall 6 inches from where his head had been. Close, but close didn't count in this game. Khalid disappeared again, and she'd lost him. The duel had entered its second phase. Both snipers knew where the other one generally was. Now it became a question of who could get a clear shot first, who could read the other's movement, who could think 3 steps ahead while staying absolutely focused on the present moment. Ilara's radio crackled. Apaches inbound 90 seconds. Stay down, danger, close fires coming in hot. 90 seconds. The helicopters would bring salvation in the form of 30mm chain guns and Hellfire missiles. But 90 seconds was an eternity in a sniper duel. Khalid knew the Apaches were coming. He'd be calculating his own timeline, knowing he had one chance to make the shot before American air power turned the battlefield into an inferno. Through her scope, Ilara caught movement. Not Khalid, but fighters repositioning around the village. And among them, being pushed forward at gunpoint, she saw something that made her heart sink. Wade Garrison. On his knees, hands zip-tied behind his back, a fighter holding an AK to his head. The radio crackled with Wade's voice, strained but controlled. They got me during Dalton's evac. Chief, do not abort air support. Complete the mission. Chief Reeves' response was immediate. Negative, we don't leave people behind. But Ilara understood the calculus. The Taliban were using Wade as a shield against the Apache strike. They knew Americans wouldn't risk killing their own, knew it bought them time to regroup, to escape, to survive to fight another day. Then Khalid appeared on a different rooftop. Higher position, better angle, 890 yards from Ilara's position. He wasn't aiming at her. He was aiming down at Wade Garrison, his rifle trained on the captured SEAL. The message was clear. Khalid could kill Wade anytime he wanted, could demonstrate that mercy was weakness, and weakness deserved death. Or he was using Wade as bait, waiting for Ilara to expose herself trying to save her teammate. Probably both. Ilara had maybe 3 seconds before Khalid made his decision. 3 seconds to calculate a shot that was at the absolute edge of her practiced range, against an elevated target, in shifting wind, with a man's life hanging in the balance. The mathematics scrolled through her mind with crystalline precision. Range 890 yards. Wind 11 miles per hour gusting to 14. Angle 38 degrees uphill. Temperature 94 Fahrenheit affecting powder burn rate. Humidity 15% affecting air density. All these variables feeding into the ballistic calculation that would determine whether her bullet arrived at the precise point in space and time where Khalid's body would be. Callum had taught her this exact scenario, had drilled it into her during their training sessions. Extreme angles change your holdover. The bullet drops less than you think because gravity works against a shorter effective distance. Trust the math, Mackenzie. Always trust the math. She trusted the math. Her breathing slowed, becoming almost imperceptible. The world narrowed until nothing existed except the crosshairs and the target. She could see Khalid's finger moving toward his trigger, could see Wade's face below, could see the choice crystallizing into a moment that would define everything. Ilara exhaled, let her heart beat twice, and squeezed the trigger between the beats. The 175-grain Sierra Match King bullet left the barrel at 2,700 feet per second. It climbed, fighting gravity, fighting wind, following the precise arc that physics and mathematics demanded. 890 yards of flight time, where 1,000 variables could turn perfection into failure. The bullet struck Commander Khalid Hassan's rifle receiver. The impact was perfect, catastrophic, the kind of shot that happened once in a career if you were lucky. The Dragunov's action exploded, the receiver shattering, sending metal fragments into Khalid's shoulder and hand. The rifle flew from his grip as he spun away from the rooftop edge, wounded but alive. For a moment, silence fell across the battlefield. Taliban fighters stared at their commander's position, unable to process what they just witnessed. Their legendary leader, the man who'd killed 23 American snipers, had just had his rifle destroyed by a shot from nearly 900 yards away. By a woman, by a soldier they'd been told was inferior, incapable, unworthy of respect. The psychological impact was immediate and total. The fighters near Wade released him and scattered, running for cover. The organized defense collapsed into chaos as men sought survival over victory. Then the Apaches arrived. The AH-64 gunships came in low and fast, their 30mm chain guns already firing. The distinctive sound of the M230 cannons was like the sky tearing apart, each gun capable of 600 rounds per minute of high explosive devastation. The village erupted. Buildings exploded as 30mm rounds punched through mud brick like paper. Taliban fighters who'd held disciplined positions seconds earlier were now running, dying, disappearing in clouds of dust and fire. Chief Reeves's voice cut through the chaos. All elements rally at LZ Charlie. Medevac inbound 60 seconds. Wade, you mobile? Mobile. Wade's voice was shaky but functional. Dalton's critical but stable. Need immediate evac. Moving. Chief Reeves paused. Mackenzie, Callum's status? Elara looked at Callum, still unconscious, his breathing even more shallow than before. Critical. He needs a surgeon 5 minutes ago. Roger, get him to the LZ. Garrison, assist Mackenzie with casualty movement. Wade appeared through the smoke and dust, his face bruised, his wrists still showing marks from the zip ties. But he was moving, functional, already pulling his medical kit. He dropped beside Callum and made a quick assessment. Tension pneumothorax. Wade's hands were already moving, pulling out a needle decompression kit. Left lung collapsed. If I don't fix this now, he'll code before we reach the bird. Elara watched as Wade performed the procedure with practiced efficiency. A 14-gauge needle inserted into the second intercostal space, releasing the pressure that was crushing Callum's lung. The effect was immediate. Callum's breathing eased slightly, his color improving from gray to merely pale. Good for transport, Wade said, but he needs a surgeon, now. Together they rigged a makeshift stretcher from equipment webbing and poncho liners. Every movement was agony for Elara, her dislocated shoulder grinding, but she didn't let go, wouldn't let go. They'd started this mission together, they'd end it together. The movement to the landing zone was 200 meters of hell. Broken terrain, loose rock, all while carrying a wounded man and taking sporadic fire from Taliban fighters who hadn't gotten the message that the battle was over. The Apaches provided cover, their guns silencing resistance before it could become dangerous. The Black Hawk medevac helicopter was already on the ground when they arrived, rotors screaming, dust blowing in blinding clouds. The flight medics grabbed Callum's stretcher and pulled him aboard, immediately starting IVs and connecting monitors. Elara climbed in after him, collapsing onto the metal floor. Her shoulder had gone beyond pain into a nauseating ache that made her vision swim. Chief Reeves pulled himself aboard, followed by Wade with Dalton on another stretcher, then the rest of the team. The helicopter lifted off, banking hard, the village receding below them. Through the open door, Elara could see smoke rising from multiple impact points where the Apaches had worked. Could see the ridge where she'd made the shot that changed everything. And standing on a distant rooftop, 700 yards away, she could see a figure. Even without optics, she knew who it was. Commander Khalid Hassan, wounded but alive, watching the helicopter carry away the Americans who'd ruined his ambush, watching Alara Mackenzie, who'd wounded him, destroyed his rifle, shattered his reputation with a single, impossible shot. Their eyes met across the distance. A promise passed between them, unspoken but absolute. This wasn't over. Khalid had killed her father 17 years ago. She just humiliated him in front of his men, wounded him, proven that he wasn't invincible. One of them was going to die before this was finished. They both knew it. The helicopter banked again, and the village disappeared from view. Ilara turned away from the door and looked at Callum. The medics were working frantically, their faces tight with concentration. One of them had his fingers on Callum's carotid, monitoring pulse. The expression on his face made Ilara's stomach clench. "Pulse is thready," the medic called out. "BP dropping, 80/40. He's going into shock." "How long to the FOB?" another medic asked. 12 minutes. He might not have 12 minutes. The medics worked faster, pushing fluids, applying pressure to bleeding wounds, doing everything they could with the limited equipment available in a flying helicopter. But Ilara could see the numbers on the monitor, could see Callum's vital signs sliding toward the red zone, where machines started alarming and survival became unlikely. She reached out with her good hand and gripped Callum's arm. His skin was cold, clammy, the texture of a man losing the fight against his injuries. "Stay with us," she whispered. "You don't get to die on me, Thorn. I just learned everything you taught me. I need you to see what I do with it." Callum's eyes didn't open. His breathing didn't change. But his fingers twitched slightly under her grip, and Ilara chose to believe that meant he'd heard her. The flight to FOB Sharana was the longest 12 minutes of Ilara's life. Every second was measured in the beep of heart monitors, the hiss of oxygen, the controlled urgency of medics who knew they were racing death and losing. Twice the monitor flatlined. Twice the medics performed CPR, shocking Callum's heart back into rhythm. Each time his vital signs returned weaker than before. When the helicopter finally touched down, a full trauma team was waiting. They pulled Callum from the bird and ran toward the field hospital, the surgeon already barking orders before they'd cleared the rotor wash. Ilara tried to follow, but a nurse grabbed her good shoulder and steered her toward a different tent. "You need treatment too, Sergeant. That shoulder's dislocated, and you've got a head laceration that needs suturing." "I need to know if Callum makes it." "You'll know, but right now you need to let us fix you." The nurse was gentle but firm, the kind of medical professional who'd learned that combat soldiers needed to be managed like patients and commanded like troops. She guided Ilara to an exam table and began cutting away her uniform to assess the damage. The shoulder reduction was agony. The doctor counted to 3, then pulled and rotated in one smooth motion that made Ilara see stars. She felt the joint pop back into place, the relief immediate despite the residual pain. 20 stitches for the forehead laceration. X-rays showing cracked ribs but no fractures. Mild concussion. Extensive bruising. Nothing life-threatening. Nothing that wouldn't heal. "You got lucky," the doctor said, taping her ribs. "That blast should have killed you." Lucky. Ilara almost laughed. She'd been blown up, dislocated her shoulder, and spent 20 minutes in a firefight that should have ended with her dead. But compared to Callum, compared to Dalton, compared to what could have happened, maybe she had been lucky. After the medical treatment, Chief Reeves found her in the recovery tent. His face was streaked with dust and dried sweat, his eyes carrying the weight of a commander who'd nearly lost his entire team. "Callum's in surgery," he said without preamble. 6 hours minimum. Surgeon says he's got maybe 50-50 odds. Ilara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Dalton's stable. Wade saved his life with field care. He'll be medevac to Germany tonight." Another nod. Chief Reeves sat down on the cot beside her. "Intel officer wants to debrief you, but that can wait. First, I need to say something." Ilara looked at him, seeing something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not quite approval, not exactly respect, something deeper, earned through blood and fire. What you did on that ridge, Chief Reeves said slowly. I've been doing this job for 19 years. I've seen good snipers. I've seen great snipers. I've never seen anyone make the shots you made under those conditions. Callum taught me well. Callum taught you technical skills. What you showed today was something else. That was instinct, natural talent that can't be taught. He paused. 19 confirmed kills in 22 minutes, most of them under extreme stress, injured, with a wounded teammate beside you. That's not just skill, that's who you are. Elara didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to process being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her military career. Not as the ammunition carrier, not as support personnel, as the sniper she'd always known she could be. There's something else, Chief Reeves continued. Intelligence intercepted Taliban radio traffic during the extraction. He pulled out a tablet and brought up a transcript. The text was in Pashto, with English translation below. Elara read the highlighted section and felt ice water flood her veins. The daughter came, Mackenzie's daughter. Allah grants me revenge. The words were attributed to Commander Khalid Hassan, transmitted just before the ambush was sprung. He knew, Elara whispered. He knew who I was. Apparently so, Chief Reeves studied her face. Want to tell me why a Taliban commander has personal knowledge of your family history? There was no point in lying now. The truth was going to come out anyway. My father was Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Mackenzie, Marine Scout Sniper, killed in action 17 years ago in Helmand Province. The after-action report listed cause of death as enemy sniper fire. Chief Reeves was quiet for a long moment. And you think Khalid was the shooter? I know he was. I've spent years cross-referencing intelligence reports, building a case. Khalid was operating in that sector. His call sign appeared in Taliban communications around the time of my father's death. He collected trophies from his kills. Did you know Khalid would be at that village when you volunteered for this deployment? It was the question that mattered. The one that would determine if she'd manipulated her way into position for personal revenge, or if this had been coincidence. No, sir. I knew Khalid operated in Helmand Province. That's why I requested this assignment. But I didn't know he'd be the target. Didn't know the ambush was specifically designed to kill me. Chief Reeves absorbed this, his face unreadable. Finally, the shot you made, 890 yards, extreme angle, against Khalid's rifle. You hit the receiver, destroyed the weapon without killing him. Yes, sir. Could you have killed him if you'd aimed center mass instead of at his rifle? Elara met his eyes. Yes, sir, I could have. Why didn't you? It was a question she'd been asking herself since she squeezed that trigger. Why not end it? Why not kill the man who'd murdered her father, who'd orchestrated an ambush to kill her, who'd spent decades killing American soldiers? Because Wade was exposed, she said finally. If I'd killed Khalid, his men might have executed Wade. And because, she paused, searching for the right words. Because I needed him to know, to understand that he'd been beaten, that his legend was broken, that a woman he'd tried to kill had wounded him, destroyed his rifle, and lived to tell about it. Chief Reeves nodded slowly. That's called psychological warfare. Humiliation is sometimes more effective than elimination. He stood up, preparing to leave. The Bronze Star with Valor device is being written up. You'll also be offered a slot in Scout Sniper School, if you want it. Accelerated course, 8 weeks instead of 12. I want it. Thought you might. He reached the tent flap, then turned back. One more thing. When Callum wakes up, assuming he does, he's going to want to know what happened after he went down. Make sure you're the one to tell him. He earned that. Then Chief Reeves was gone, leaving Elara alone with her thoughts, in the ghost of her father, in the memory of Commander Khalid Hassan's eyes, across 700 yards of hostile ground. 6 hours later, a surgeon found Elara in the dining facility, staring at a tray of food she hadn't touched. The surgeon's scrubs were stained with blood, his face lined with exhaustion. "Sergeant Mackenzie? I'm Dr. Brennan. I just finished working on your teammate." Elara was on her feet before he finished speaking. "How is he?" "Alive. Barely." Dr. Brennan sat down heavily. "He took shrapnel in his right lung, liver, and intestines. We removed what we could, repaired what we had to. He's lost a lot of blood, been in shock, coded twice during transport, but he's stable now. Will he recover? Hard to say. He'll be medevaced to Landstuhl, Germany within 24 hours for follow-up surgery and rehabilitation. Long-term, he's looking at months of recovery. Whether he'll be fit for full duty again? The doctor shrugged. That's above my pay grade. Elara felt something loosen in her chest. Stable meant alive. Alive meant a chance. A chance meant she hadn't failed. "Can I see him?" "Briefly. He's sedated, won't be conscious for hours. But you can sit with him." Callum looked small in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped softly in the quiet room. His face was pale, his breathing assisted by a ventilator. But his heart was beating. His chest was rising and falling. He was alive. Elara pulled up a chair and sat beside him. She didn't know what to say, didn't know if he could even hear her, but she needed to speak anyway. "You told me to make the shot," she said quietly. "So I did. 19 confirmed kills. Khalid wounded, his rifle destroyed. The team got out. Mission accomplished." She paused, watching his chest rise and fall. "You were right. I do have something to prove. To myself, to you, to my father's memory. And today, I proved it." She touched his hand gently. "Thank you for teaching me, for seeing what I could be before I saw it myself, for giving me the tools to save all of us." Callum's eyes didn't open. His hand didn't move. But Elara chose to believe he heard her anyway. She stayed until the nurses told her visiting hours were over. Then she walked out into the Afghan night, under stars that looked the same as they had 17 years ago when her father died under them. The war wasn't over. Khalid was still alive, still dangerous, still hunting her as surely as she was hunting him. But something had changed on that ridge. She wasn't the ammunition carrier anymore. Wasn't support personnel tagging along on someone else's mission. She was Elara Mackenzie, scout sniper, daughter of Garrett Mackenzie, the woman who'd made the impossible shot and lived to make another. And when she met Commander Khalid Hassan again, one of them wasn't going to walk away. The rifle range at FOB Chapman stretched across a valley floor that had seen 1,000 years of violence and would probably see 1,000 more. Elara Mackenzie settled into the prone position behind the M110, her body finding the angle that made the weapon an extension of her will, rather than a tool she controlled. 600 yards downrange, a steel target waited. Cold-bore shot. First round from a cold barrel, no warm-up, no sighters. The kind of shot that separated real snipers from people who just knew how to shoot. Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Cormack stood behind her, arms crossed, his weathered face showing nothing. At 44, Cormack had 87 confirmed kills across 3 deployments. He'd spent the last decade teaching Marines how to be snipers, and he didn't suffer fools or accept excuses. "You've made some shots under stress," he said, his voice carrying the flat accent of rural Georgia. "Adrenaline does interesting things to people. Makes them capable of things they can't replicate when their life isn't on the line." Elara said nothing, just breathed, calculated, and sent the shot downrange. The steel target rang 600 yards away. Center mass hit. Cormack walked to the spotting scope, checked the impact point, and made a note on his clipboard. His face still showed nothing. Again. New target, 650 yards. Elara chambered another round and found the new target. Wind had shifted slightly, now quartering from the right at maybe 8 miles per hour. She adjusted her hold and fired. The target rang again. 700 yards, Cormack said. Ring. 750. Ring. 800. Ring. Cormac finally showed something on his face. Not quite approval, but recognition. In 22 years of instructing, I've seen 3 people shoot cold bore groups like that. You just became number 4. It had been 6 weeks since the ambush. 6 weeks since Callum had been medevaced to Germany, his future uncertain. 6 weeks since Alara had picked up a rifle and become something more than she'd been. The Bronze Star with Valor device had been awarded in a brief ceremony that she barely remembered. Chief Reeves had pinned the medal to her uniform, while the rest of SEAL Team 7 stood at attention. Then they'd offered her the thing she'd wanted since the moment she understood what her father had been. A slot in Scout Sniper School. The course was normally 12 weeks of the most intensive training the military offered. They'd condensed it to 8 weeks for her, an accelerated program that assumed she already had the basics and just needed the advanced skills in official certification. The first 2 weeks had been fundamentals review, marksmanship, ballistics, environmental factors. Alara had topped every test, broken every range record, and demonstrated a level of natural ability that made even the skeptical instructors take notice. Weeks 3 and 4 had been advanced ballistics in fieldcraft, learning to calculate Coriolis effect, how to account for spin drift on extreme long-range shots, how to read terrain for the subtle signatures of wind and weather, how to move through hostile territory without being seen, how to build a hide that would conceal her from observers 10 feet away. She'd scored 98 out of 100 on the wind reading test, missing only 2 subtle shifts that even Cormac admitted were borderline impossible to detect. The previous course record had been 91. Weeks 5 and 6 had been stalking exercises, moving through terrain while trained observers tried to spot her, getting close enough to take a simulated shot without being detected. Alara had completed all 6 exercises without being spotted once. The final stalk, she'd gotten within 150 yards of 3 Marine instructors who'd been specifically looking for her. "You move like a ghost," one of them had said afterward, equal parts impressed and unsettled. Now, in weeks 7 and 8, they were testing her under stress. Physical exhaustion, psychological pressure, scenarios designed to replicate the chaos and fear of actual combat. They wanted to see if her performance on that ridge had been an anomaly driven by adrenaline, or if she could replicate it on command. After the cold bore shooting, Cormac led her to an obstacle course. Full combat load, 50-pound ruck, rifle, body armor. Run the course, then immediately transition to shooting positions. 6 targets, distances from 400 to 900 yards. You've got 90 seconds to engage all targets after completing the course. Alara shouldered the pack, checked her gear, and waited for the signal. Go! She ran. The obstacle course was a deliberate hell designed to exhaust even fit soldiers. Climbing walls, crawling under wire, carrying heavy loads up steep inclines. Her shoulder, still healing from the dislocation, screamed in protest. Her ribs, cracked from the explosion, sent lightning through her torso with each breath. She ignored it all. Pain was just information. 3 minutes and 40 seconds later, she crossed the finish line and dropped into the first shooting position. Her heart was hammering at 180 beats per minute. Her hands were shaking. Her breathing was ragged. Every instinct screamed to rest, to recover, but the timer was running. She forced her breathing to slow, found the first target through the scope, and fired. The steel rang at 400 yards. She transitioned to the second position, found the next target at 550 yards, and engaged. The bullet struck home. Target 3 at 620 yards. Hit. Target 4 at 780 yards. Hit. Target 5 at 840 yards. Hit. The final target was at 900 yards, the extreme edge of the M110's effective range. At this distance, after physical exhaustion, with her heart rate still elevated and her hands still shaking, the shot was borderline impossible. Alara settled into the position, forced her heart rate down through sheer will, calculated wind and distance, and all the variables that mattered, and sent the shot. The steel rang. 6 for 6 in 83 seconds. Cormac walked over with the spotting scope data. He studied her target impacts, made notes, and finally looked at her with something that might have been respect. The stress shoot is designed to have a 70% pass rate, he said, meaning you can miss 2 targets and still pass. In the history of this course, 4 people have gone 6 for 6. You just became number 5. He paused, then added, and you did it faster than any of the other 4. The psychological evaluation came 2 days before graduation. Staff psychologist Dr. Evelyn Hartwell was a civilian contractor, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a demeanor that suggested she'd heard every story soldiers could tell and wasn't impressed by any of them. "Tell me about your father," she said, cutting straight to what mattered. Elara had known this was coming. Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Mackenzie, Marine Scout sniper, killed in action, Helmand Province, 17 years ago. By Commander Khalid Hassan, the same man you encountered during the ambush that killed nobody, but nearly killed Petty Officer Thorne. "Yes, ma'am," Dr. Hartwell made a note. "You had a clear shot at Commander Hassan. You chose to destroy his rifle instead of killing him. Why?" "Tactical considerations. My teammate was exposed. Killing Khalid might have prompted his men to execute the hostage." "That's the official answer. What's the real one?" Elara met the psychologist's eyes. "I needed him to know he'd been beaten, that his reputation was broken, that he'd underestimated me and paid for it. So it was personal. Everything in war is personal, ma'am. The difference is whether you let it compromise your judgment." Dr. Hartwell leaned back in her chair. "You've demonstrated remarkable compartmentalization, exceptional ability to function under stress, natural talent that instructors describe as once in a generation." She paused. "I'm also seeing indicators of someone with unresolved trauma using professional excellence as a coping mechanism." "Is that a problem, ma'am?" "Depends. Are you seeking to honor your father's memory or avenge his death?" It was the question Elara had been asking herself for 6 weeks. The question she'd been asking for 17 years, really, since the day 2 Marines in dress blues had knocked on her door and told her 9-year-old self that Daddy wasn't coming home. "Both," she said finally. "I want to be as good as he was. Better, if possible. And yes, I want the man who killed him to face consequences. But I'm not going to compromise missions or endanger teammates to satisfy personal revenge." Dr. Hartwell studied her for a long moment. Then she signed the evaluation form. "Recommend approval for sniper designation, with continued monitoring for indicators of revenge motivation affecting judgment." On the final day of the 8-week course, Elara stood in formation with 11 other graduates. 2 were women, 10 were men. All of them had survived training that washed out 60% of candidates. All of them had earned the right to call themselves Scout Snipers. Gunnery Sergeant Cormac walked down the line, presenting each graduate with their certificate and sniper qualification badge. When he reached Elara, he stopped. "Staff Sergeant Mackenzie, overall score, 97.8%. Highest in class. Highest I've seen in 6 years of instructing." He pinned the badge to her uniform. "You're the real deal. Don't waste it." "No, sir." After the ceremony, Elara found a message waiting. Callum had called from Landstuhl Medical Center in Germany. She found a satellite phone and returned the call. His voice was weaker than she remembered, but the determination in it was unmistakable. "Heard you topped the class. You taught me well. I taught you mechanics. What you've got, that's something else." He paused, and she could hear the pain medication slurring his words slightly. "They're telling me 6 more months of recovery, maybe a year before I'm cleared for operations, if I'm cleared at all. You'll make it back. Maybe, maybe not. Lung capacity isn't what it was. Chronic pain. Body doesn't bounce back like it used to." Another pause. "But you know what? I'm okay with it, because I was there on that ridge. I saw you pick up that rifle, saw you make those shots, and I knew right then that everything I'd learned, everything I'd done, it wasn't ending with me. It was continuing through you. Ilara felt her throat tighten. I couldn't have done it without your training. Yes, you could have. Maybe not as well, maybe not as fast, but you've got the gift, Mackenzie. The thing that separates good snipers from great ones. You see the whole battlefield. You think 3 moves ahead. You make the impossible shot and act like it was routine. His voice dropped. Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. After the call ended, Ilara sat for a long time, holding the phone, thinking about legacy and skill, and the weight of expectations carried across generations. 3 months after the ambush, she returned to SEAL Team 7. The base looked the same, but everything felt different. She wasn't returning as ammunition carrier or support personnel. She was returning as their sniper. Chief Reeves greeted her in his office, his weathered face showing the stress of 3 months of continuous operations. Welcome back, Staff Sergeant. How was school? Top the class, sir. Heard that. Also heard Cormac said you're the best natural talent he's seen in 22 years. High praise from a man who doesn't give it often. I had a good foundation, sir. Chief Reeves pulled out a folder. New intel on Khalid. He disappeared after the ambush, went dark for 2 months. Our sources say he was recovering from the shoulder wound you gave him, but 3 weeks ago, he resurfaced, and he's been busy. The folder contains surveillance photos, intercepted communications, intelligence reports. Khalid had rebuilt his network, recruited new fighters, and resumed operations throughout Helmand province. But something had changed. His tactics were more aggressive now, more personal. He was specifically targeting American sniper positions, going after scout teams, trying to prove that his defeat had been an anomaly. He's trying to restore his reputation, Chief Reeves said, and he's doing it by killing our people. Ilara studied the reports. 3 American snipers killed in the past 3 weeks, all in circumstances that bore Khalid's signature, all demonstrating his trademark patience and precision. There's more, Chief Reeves continued. NSA intercepted communications. Khalid is planning something big, an attack on a coalition base, possibly Camp Dwyer. 500 American personnel. He wants a high body count to prove he's still relevant. When? Within the next 2 weeks. We don't have exact timing. Ilara looked at the map showing Khalid's area of operations. It was close to where her father had died, close to where the ambush had happened, close to where everything had started. We're going after him, she said. It wasn't a question. Joint operation, SEAL Team 7 and Army Rangers. 32 operators total. We've narrowed his location to 3 possible compounds in Helmand province. Chief Reeves met her eyes. You'll be primary sniper. Callum is stateside now. Medical retirement pending. The rifle is yours. The rifle. Callum's M110 that had become hers when she'd picked it up on that ridge and used it to save everyone's life. The weapon that had transformed her from support personnel to the most dangerous piece on the board. There's one more thing, Chief Reeves said. Latest intel says Khalid is holding 4 American contractors hostage, civilian workers who were captured during a convoy ambush. He's planning to execute them as part of his demonstration. He pulled out another photo. The location made Ilara's blood run cold. Kalat-i-Zaman, the same village where the ambush had happened. The village that was 6 kilometers from where her father had died. He chose the location deliberately, Chief Reeves said. He knows you'll come. He's counting on it. This is a trap designed specifically for you. Ilara studied the map, calculating fields of fire, approach routes, positions that would give advantage or disadvantage. It was absolutely a trap. Khalid had spent 3 months planning how to kill her, and he'd chosen the perfect location to do it. When do we leave? She asked. Chief Reeves almost smiled. 18 hours. Briefing at 0600. The mission brief was comprehensive. Satellite imagery, human intelligence, intercepted communications, everything they could gather about Khalid's position and capabilities. The compound in Kalat-i-Zaman was fortified, with 40 to 50 fighters, multiple heavy weapons positions, and clear fields of fire covering all approaches. The plan was complex but straightforward. Rangers would breach from the south, drawing attention and suppressing resistance. SEAL Team 7 would hit from the west, moving to secure the hostages. And Alara would be on overwatch from the ridge, the same position where everything had changed 3 months ago, providing precision fire support. Rules of engagement are weapons-free, the mission commander said. This is a hostile force holding American citizens. We're authorized to use lethal force to secure the hostages and eliminate the threat. After the briefing, Alara prepared her equipment with the ritual precision that calmed pre-mission nerves. The M110 cleaned and serviced until every component moved with mechanical perfection. 8 magazines of 175-grain Sierra Match King ammunition, spotting scope, rangefinder, weather station for precise atmospheric readings, and her father's compass, the brass worn smooth from 17 years of handling, the coordinates still sharp and clear. She opened the compass and found the letter tucked inside. She'd kept it there since the day the Marines had given it to her, her father's last words written 3 days before he died. Alara, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. Know that every shot I took was to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The rifle is a tool of justice in righteous hands. I see that righteousness in you. Be brave, be sure, be deadly when it counts. Love always, Dad. Be deadly when it counts. The infiltration to the ridge took 4 hours of careful movement through terrain that seemed determined to kill them through sheer hostility. Sharp rocks, loose scree, elevation that stole breath and burned legs. But SEAL Team 7 moved with the practiced efficiency of professionals who'd done this 1,000 times. They reached the ridge just as dawn began painting the eastern sky in shades of red and gold. Alara and Chief Reeves, who'd insisted on being her spotter for this mission, moved to the exact position where she'd fought 3 months ago. The bullet scars were still visible in the rocks. Dark stains that might have been blood, might have been rust, might have been both. The ground where Callum had nearly died, where she'd picked up his rifle and become something more than she'd been. Feels like coming home, Chief Reeves said quietly. Alara settled behind the rifle, feeling the familiar weight, the way the stock nestled against her cheek like it had been custom-made for her body. Through the scope, Kalat-e-Zaman resolved into sharp detail. The compound was exactly where intelligence had said. 2-story structure, reinforced walls, guards at every corner. Through windows, she could see movement. And in the central courtyard, 4 figures with hands bound, kneeling in the dust. The hostages. Range to compound entrance? Chief Reeves asked, eye to the spotting scope. 760 yards. Wind? Alara studied the flags she could see, the movement of dust, the shimmer of heat rising from the valley floor. 8 miles per hour, quartering right to left. Temperature? 86 Fahrenheit. They settled in to wait. The Rangers were still moving into position. The assault was scheduled for 0612, coordinated to the second. Until then, they observed and gathered intelligence. Through her scope, Alara watched the compound come to life. Fighters moving to positions, checking weapons, preparing for what they clearly knew was coming. Khalid had anticipated this, had planned for it, was ready. At 0610, Chief Reeves received the signal. All elements report ready. Rangers are go in 2 minutes. Alara's breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. The pre-combat calm that separated professionals from amateurs settled over her like a familiar coat. At 0612 exactly, the Rangers breached the compound's southern wall with explosive charges. The blast echoed across the valley, followed immediately by the crackle of gunfire as the assault force pushed through the breach. The compound erupted. Taliban fighters poured from buildings, moving to defensive positions, engaging the Rangers with coordinated fire. This wasn't a rabble. These were trained soldiers who'd rehearsed this exact scenario. SEAL Team 7 hit the western wall seconds later, blowing their own breach and pushing into the compound. The plan was working. The enemy was bracketed, caught between two assault forces. Then Alara saw movement on the compound's highest rooftop, a figure emerging from a doorway carrying a long rifle. Even at 760 yards, even through the chaos of combat, she recognized him instantly. Commander Khalid Hassan had entered the fight. He moved to a position overlooking the courtyard where the hostages were kneeling. His rifle, a new SVD Dragunov to replace the one she destroyed, swung toward the hostages. The message was clear. If the assault succeeded, he'd execute the hostages before he could be stopped. Would kill 4 Americans as his final act, proving that sometimes you couldn't save everyone. "I've got Khalid," Alara reported. "He's positioning to execute hostages." "Can you take the shot?" Chief Reeves asked. "Yes." "Then take it." But Alara hesitated. Something felt wrong. Khalid was too exposed, too obvious. A man who'd survived 40 years of combat didn't make mistakes like that. Then she understood. He wasn't making a mistake, he was making a choice. Khalid wanted her to shoot, wanted her to reveal her position. Because somewhere in the compound, hidden among the fighters and chaos, he had a counter-sniper team positioned to kill whoever took that shot. "It's bait," she said. "He's drawing me out." "Can you make the shot without exposing yourself?" "No, the angle requires me to rise above this rock. 2 seconds of exposure, maybe 3. "That's all a good sniper needs," Chief Reeves said grimly. Ilara's mind raced through the calculations. Khalid knew her position, had probably known it since she'd established the hide, had positioned his counter-sniper team specifically to cover this exact piece of ground. If she rose to make the shot, she'd be dead seconds later. But if she didn't take the shot, 4 Americans would die. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Her life against theirs, 1 against 4. The calculation every sniper had to make eventually. Through the scope, she watched Khalid settle behind his rifle. Watched 760 yards in just over a second, crossing the space between vengeance and justice with mechanical precision. Commander Khalid Hassan dropped, the Dragunov falling from his hands. Through the scope, Alara saw him collapse, saw the massive chest wound, saw the finality of the shot. Then she saw the muzzle flash from a window 300 yards to the left. Khalid's counter-sniper team, exactly where she'd known they would be. She shifted positions, moving 20 feet to the left to change her exposure profile. Found a gap between rocks that gave her just enough sightline. Through the scope, she caught movement in the window. The counter-sniper, relocating, briefly silhouetted against interior darkness. Ilara's shot took him in the chest. He fell backward, disappearing into the building. "Threat neutralized," she reported. The battle continued for another 8 minutes, but the outcome was never in doubt. With Khalid dead and the counter-sniper eliminated, the Taliban fighters lost their tactical leadership. The Rangers and SEALs swept through the compound with professional efficiency, clearing rooms, neutralizing resistance, securing hostages. 0 American casualties. All 4 hostages recovered safely. 43 enemy fighters killed or captured. And on a rooftop in the center of the compound, Commander Khalid Hassan lay dead, killed by the daughter of the man he'd murdered 17 years ago. Chief Reeves and Alara descended from the ridge after the all-clear was called. They moved through the compound, past wounded fighters receiving medical aid, past Rangers conducting sensitive site exploitation, past the hostages being treated by medics. They climbed to the rooftop where Khalid had fallen. He lay on his back, eyes open and unseeing. The entry wound centered perfectly in his chest. A clean shot, a professional shot, the kind of shot that honored the craft even as it ended a life. Chief Reeves began searching the body, looking for intelligence materials. What he found made him pause. a length of chain around Khalid's neck, and hanging from it, 2 sets of military dog tags. He handed them to Alara without comment. The first set was weathered, the stamping faded but still legible. Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Mackenzie, USMC. Her father's tags, taken as a trophy 17 years ago, worn as proof of a kill, a symbol of superiority. The second set was newer, stamped with information that made Alara's blood run cold. PFC Brendan Locke, U.S. Army, Callum Spotter. The man who died 4 years ago when Callum took an unauthorized shot. Khalid had killed him too, collected his tags as another trophy. Alara removed both sets of dog tags and clutched them in her fist. 2 lives taken, 2 families destroyed, 40 years of killing refined into an art form that Khalid had practiced with dedication and skill. And now he was dead, killed by someone who'd learned from the best and become better than anyone had expected. Mission complete, Chief Reeves said quietly. Alara looked at the tags, then at Khalid's body, then at the sunrise painting the mountains in shades of gold. Yes, sir. Mission complete. 6 months later, Alara stood in front of a classroom at Fort Benning, Georgia. The sign outside read, Scout Sniper Instructor Course. Inside, 12 students sat in neat rows, notebooks ready, eyes forward. 2 of the students were women, 10 were men. All of them had graduated from Scout Sniper School. All of them wanted to learn how to teach others. My name is Staff Sergeant Alara Mackenzie, she began. I'll be your primary instructor for the next 8 weeks. Before we start, I want to tell you a story about the first time I picked up a sniper rifle under combat conditions. She spent the next hour walking them through the ambush, the decision to pick up Callum's rifle, the shots she'd made, the lessons she'd learned. She didn't glorify it, didn't make it sound easy or heroic. She told them the truth about fear and pain and the weight of responsibility that came with being the person who made the shots that determined whether teammates lived or died. The rifle is a tool, she concluded, one of the most precise tools humans have ever created. But tools require skill, and skill requires dedication. Natural talent helps. Training helps. But what really matters is whether you can perform when everything is going wrong and lives depend on you being better than you think you can be. After the class, one of the female students approached. Private Sienna Vaughn, 21 years old, fresh from sniper school and eager but uncertain. Staff Sergeant, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you ever doubt yourself? Ever wonder if you're good enough? Alara considered the question. Every day, every shot, every mission, doubt is natural. The question is whether you let it stop you or use it to make you better. How do you use it? By remembering that competence isn't a destination, it's a process. You're never as good as you think you are, but you're also more capable than you believe. The trick is finding the balance. She pulled the M110 from its case, the rifle that had been Callum's, that had saved her life and the lives of her team, that had ended a war that started before she was born. This rifle has a history, Alara said. It belonged to one of the best snipers I ever knew. He taught me everything about the technical aspects of this job. But the important stuff, the things that make you actually effective, those I had to learn myself through experience. She handed the rifle to Sienna. Take it to the range, 700 yards, cold bore. Show me what you can do. They walked to the range together, instructor and student, passing knowledge across generations the way it had always been passed, through demonstration and correction, and the patient building of skills that separated professionals from amateurs. Sienna settled behind the rifle, adjusted the scope, calculated wind and distance with whispered math. Her first shot missed by 6 inches. Again, Alara said. The second shot missed by 3 inches. Again, the third shot rang steel, 700 yards away. Sienna looked up, surprised and pleased. I did it. Yes, you did. Now do it again. And again. and again until it's not luck or chance, but skill that you can call upon whenever needed. After the range session, Elara returned to her office. On the wall hung 3 sets of dog tags. Her father's tags, recovered from college body. Brendan Locke's tags, returned to his family with a letter explaining how they'd been recovered. And a new set, stamped with Callum Thorne's information, given to her before he'd been medically retired. Below the dog tags was her bronze star. Next to it, her Scout Sniper qualification badge. And on the desk, the brass compass that had guided her through 17 years of preparation for a moment that lasted 3 seconds. She opened the compass and read her father's letter one more time. Be brave, be sure, be deadly when it counts. She'd been all 3. Had honored his memory by becoming better than fear and doubt said she could be. Had proven that capability wasn't about gender or expectations, but about dedication and skill, and the willingness to rise when circumstances demanded it. The phone rang. Chief Reeves, calling from Afghanistan, where SEAL Team 7 continued operations without her. How's the teaching life? He asked. Different from operations, but important. Heard you've got a good crop of students this cycle. They're motivated. That's half the battle. Chief Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then, we got final confirmation on Khalid. 43 years of operations. Estimated kill count over 200 coalition soldiers. You ended the career of one of the most effective insurgent snipers in modern warfare. Callum trained me. You gave me the opportunity. The team kept me alive long enough to make the shot. Take the win, Mackenzie. You earned it. After the call ended, Elara walked to the window. The sun was setting over Fort Benning, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, new soldiers were training. New snipers were learning the craft. New generations were preparing for wars that hadn't started yet, but inevitably would. And she was part of that chain now. Not just a sniper, but a teacher. Passing knowledge forward the way Callum had passed it to her. Making sure the lessons learned in Blood and Fire weren't lost, but preserved and improved and carried forward. She'd started as an ammunition carrier, had become a sniper through necessity and skill, and now she was something more important than either of those. She was the link between generations, the person who ensured that what her father had known, what Callum had taught her, what she'd learned through experience, would continue beyond her own career. The rifle leaning against her desk wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a legacy, a responsibility, a promise that the skills required to protect those who couldn't protect themselves would never be lost as long as someone was willing to teach them. Elara touched the compass one final time, feeling the weight of 17 years fall away. Her father would never come home. Callum would never shoot again. But their knowledge lived on through her, and through her students, and through every generation that followed. She wasn't supposed to have been there on that ridge, wasn't supposed to have picked up that rifle, wasn't supposed to have made those shots, but she had, and in doing so had proven that capability wasn't about permission or expectation. It was about preparation meeting opportunity and having the courage to rise when the moment demanded it. The sun completed its descent, leaving the world in twilight. Tomorrow she'd teach again, would pass knowledge to students who'd carry it forward, would ensure that the legacy continued. But tonight she allowed herself to simply be proud. Proud of what she'd accomplished. Proud of who she'd become. Proud of the shot that changed everything. And in the gathering darkness, with her father's compass in her hand and his words in her heart, Staff Sergeant Elara Mackenzie smiled. Mission complete.